You may have noticed, you should have gotten a notice that, that on Saturday evening I put up the last participation quiz. And it's rather important. It is 30 questions, worth about double the normal participation quiz because it's basically covering 3 weeks or maybe even 4 weeks. I don't remember how many weeks it's been since we had one. And also, since your last quarterly quiz is on Wednesday, being our last day of the semester, many of the questions on this quiz could be in that quiz. So you should go. You should take the quiz, even if you do poorly. You don't have much time to take it before the quarterly quiz, so that means tonight or tomorrow you need to take that quiz, and should take it even if you do poorly, so you know the questions that might be because most your quarterly quiz will be essentially the same questions you've already seen, which is the reason why I haven't been giving you the answers, is that you need to look up for the answers, because if I gave you all the answers, all you would do is memorize, right? And so that's too easy. As it is, it's not too hard. You've seen the questions, and so you have some idea of what you did not so well, and can correct those, and it would not surprise me if the majority of people got an A in the last quarterly quiz. However, we've hardly had any Monday classes for the last month, as you've noticed, and I've had no makeup classes, but I did have makeup online assignments, including these ones here. This one is actually one that you should have watched earlier in the semester, but I put it back again because some of you are still is that the one? No, that's not that one. This one here, the journalism basics, or whatever you'll call it, because some of you are struggling with your writing, and you don't have a clear idea what you're supposed to be doing for your reporting assignments. So I put that one back on, and there's one in economics. And there's going to be a lot of questions in this participation quiz on these videos. And so if you haven't taken it yet, which I presume most of you have not, you should watch these videos again if you have not already, and maybe take a few notes and be ready to go back and look at them during the quiz. There are some of these available down here in PowerPoint, so you could open those during your quiz, in case you need to run back there and you have. I can't remember if it's 40 or 40 minutes to do 30 questions. So it's not like you have a lot of time, but if you know some of them know some of them already, you can do those and then come back and try to find the right answers real quickly. But I'm telling you right now that a good share of the questions are coming from these videos because those were replacement classes. And we haven't had many Monday classes, so you should have watched these. If you didn't, then maybe I shouldn't have told you. I should have just let you be penalized for not doing what you were supposed to do. But the other reason why I did these, and I would have been presenting these in class if we had had Monday classes, but we didn't have Monday classes. And so I couldn't have presented these because we just ran out of time. But as I told you in the first of the semester, I want this class to be as practical as possible. There are, at least in America, about 3 times as many jobs in PR as there are in news. And when I did my last survey of nearly 1,000 communication executives, about a quarter, well, more than a quarter of those were, I'd say almost a third of those were PR executives. And it was interesting to me, I went down a long list of things that they might want somebody to learn as part of their PR training. And they were the same questions I asked the news media executives. And so I went down a whole list. Let me see, how to do basic reporting, how to, learn basic spelling and grammar, how to do in-depth reporting, how to do editing, these sorts of basic questions. And also included was how to write a press release. The PR executives put how to write a press release like number 12. Their first ones were all the same as journalism. I was quite pleasantly surprised in some ways that the two disciplines have not diverged that much. In America, where the professors are very liberal and snooty sometimes and think they're better than everybody else, they think it has been a problem. They want to ignore industry. And so the results I've gotten over more than 30 years of research says they're not teaching journalism students correctly in America, and they've totally ignored it for more than 3 decades. They do not want to teach it the way that the professionals, that the employers want them to teach it. And so that was one problem. But anyway, what I was trying to explain is, so consequently, the journalism departments in many of the universities have said, we don't want those people with us. Those people are like prostitutes. We don't want them in our department. And so PR has been given to the business college, and journalism has gone to the humanities college. Even though they have the same skills, it makes absolutely no sense, economically or anything else, to split them. It's this high superior morality of the journalism professors, particularly those with the PhDs, who do not want those scandalous PR people in their department. And so it was interesting that despite that being the trend in America, the professionals still want them to have the same skills. And so it was almost exactly the top 6 or so skills were almost identical between PR and journalism, which, again, was a little bit surprising, and to me a little bit pleasingly surprising. I myself had made, as I mentioned before, the transition from journalism over into PR marketing for about a decade and did very well at it. And so I certainly believe that's possible. And in fact, I've talked to PR executives in personal interviews, and many of them say that they will not hire somebody in PR if they haven't had professional experience in journalism, particularly in the area of media relations. They might hire them for something like, PR covers a number of different things. Media relations is only one of them. Another area is employee relations. Well, you don't need newspaper experience to do employee relations. Another one is investor relations. Well, you may not need journalism experience to do that. It might help, but you don't need it. They also have government relations. Government has boards that oversee their stock trades and stuff like that. You may want an economist to be in investor relations, and maybe they might double time with their government relations. But the one that we typically see as being a PR function are those involved with media relations. And the PR executives would, basically the trend is we don't hire anybody in media relations who don't have media experience. They don't know what they're talking about. And I think I mentioned before, research suggests that about 90% of all press releases go in the garbage because they tend to, because a large share of these people working in PR do not have media experience. And so they don't know how to prepare things. They don't know how an editor thinks. And that's why I was able to get news stories on the very front page of a newspaper as a PR person, because I knew how they thought. And so when I sent them a story, that was better than their reporters would have written, because I'm a good writer and I'm a former editor and I know how they think. And so consequently, they rewrote the story. They sent their own reporter, as most big newspapers do that have a decent staff. They sent their own reporter to come to the engineering architectural firm I was working for, which is pretty hard, by the way, for an engineering architectural firm to get a story on the front page, because that's kind of boring, So you have to have first off, as a journalist, I had to understand that there was something there that was newsworthy, that was unusually newsworthy. And I had to be able to write it in such a way that they would say, oh, wow, we need to cover this. And so they sent their own reporter out, they took their own pictures and everything. Even though I provided them the story, they don't. A good newspaper doesn't want to just run a press release. So they came out and rewrote it themselves, but it's essentially what I wrote. And it also, other stories I got as a lead story in TV news without paying anything, because I'm a journalist and they appreciated the journalistic approach. So that's why PR executives want people who have journalism experience. They want to hire them for anybody in media relations especially. And so if you're a generalist covering more than one of those areas, they're going to want you to have media experience. And if you don't, then, like I say, you're going to be writing press releases like those that are being thrown in the garbage. And there are lots and lots and lots of people in PR who do not, at this point, have the right kind of experience. We are hoping to add a second major, but while we're waiting for that to be approved, I'm telling Chan Song that we need you all to have a class in PR to know how to make that transition easier anyway if you end up going into PR. And if you get into publishing, like I did, when I was starting when I was 25, I had to learn how to do advertising. And I did not have adequate training in advertising, so I had to figure this out on my own. And luckily I was successful. So you should have some advertising background, if nothing else, in case you're a publisher, in case you're an executive of media. You need to understand the advertising side of it. Now this is only covering traditional advertising, and I have been invited by the assistant president to create a new course in digital advertising and maybe even digital advertising and PR, which I would recommend. It would be a gen ed course, and maybe we could add it to our curriculum in our department. But they're mainly wanting me to do it for the business department, because the business department doesn't have strong marketing people. And this is the sort of stuff that I've been writing about, like these new chapters I'm spending all my time on, is about digital advertising and PR. And so we just got done interviewing a couple of people we were considering hiring for our department. And they were supposedly advertising specialists. And so in each case, I snuck in a question to see how up-to-date they were. So I asked them a question that would require them to know what native advertising was. I think I've told you what it is here in class, right? Neither one of them knew what native advertising was. So they're professionals that supposedly have experience and specific training in advertising. They don't know, and in case you didn't remember, that the predictions are that native advertising will become 75% of all digital advertising, and it's becoming extremely popular in all non-digital advertising. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal are all selling all selling native advertising. So to not know what native advertising is right now means you really don't know much of anything. You know how to write copy, basically. You're a copywriter, which one of them actually was. That's her. She has more than 10 years of experience, but only as a copywriter. And so she's not the brains of the outfit. And maybe her bosses know about native advertising, but she knows how to write copy. She just does what she's told. So it's important that, and especially as we start considering, there are some universities that have majors in entrepreneurial journalism. What that means is basically you're on your own, baby. The newspapers are going broke. How do you survive as a journalist if you're doing it on your own? And so that means things like blogging and stuff like that. How do you make money if you don't have an organization to support you, or how do you start your own organization that could help you make a living if you don't have a big corporation behind you? This would also help this, and I think, well, I did already require you to watch one on digital advertising that I'd done separately, but that's not in this quiz. So if you don't understand digital advertising and you don't understand traditional advertising, if you don't know how to, for example, we mistakenly hired somebody at my last university who had a PhD in marketing. And then when she got there, she had lots of publications and stuff. And when she got to our university, we found out she had actually never worked professionally. She's claimed to have 2 months of experience as a professional. That was almost certainly an internship. And so she had no idea how to do traditional advertising. Well, she didn't have any idea how to actually do any advertising. She only knew books. She knew what she learned from books. And so we had courses on how to use desktop publishing, how to actually create your ads, and in desktop publishing, how to make them, what are the elements of a good ad, traditional ad, how do you make it up to be the most powerful possible and to get people's attention and get them sold on your product. She had no clue any of that stuff. So just because somebody has a PhD or just because somebody worked at a PR advertising agency for a dozen years doesn't mean they know what the heck is going on now, or maybe even know how some of the basic skills they needed to know with the traditional, like how to actually do it. Not how, she might have had some theory, but for example, she didn't know any of the software to actually create an ad electronically. And if you're going to be a publisher, you need to know that stuff. So when you take my editing class from me, you will use desktop publishing. Right now we're using a freeware, but we hope to have InDesign, which is basically the standard of the industry. And the freeware I'm using is actually more like InDesign than is the inexpensive, but still you have to pay for MS Publisher, which is a type of desktop publishing. But it's first off not very good, and secondly, not at all like InDesign. Whereas the freeware I am teaching right now is a lot like InDesign. Not as good, but it's more like InDesign than is MS Publisher, and it's free. So until we get InDesign, that's what we're having to use. But anyway, those are skills that you need to develop in order to be able to work in this industry or to have the most opportunities in this industry. So again, coming back to this, so we have one here on advertising basics, and it's all traditional advertising, in a sense, but not really, because what you learn with the traditional advertising would also be very effective web page design, for example. Some of the things you'll learn in the traditional would be effective for web page design, and as we've talked about, one of the keys in current digital advertising is that you typically don't have a very big ad. You have, like native ad, you might be in the Facebook timeline. And so it might be a video. And ideally, that video will not just keep you on Facebook, but will actually take you then to your website. So that you buy a small ad and it takes you to your website, which can have anything you want on it. And so ideally with your content marketing, which is free, and your native advertising, which is not free, one of your main purposes is to get people to go to your website. So that enhances your SEO, your search engine optimization, by having lots of content on your website. And it gets people to your website directly from Facebook or Twitter or wherever. Take them to your website. And your website, you can have a web page designed by traditional methods like is taught in this video. It may not be exactly, it's a little more challenging to do it with HTML programming than it is with something like InDesign. But it's close enough that at least you can understand the principles and they can be applied, if not perfectly, at least pretty closely. You can apply them. So just because the traditional advertising is starting to disappear in the world, starting in America and probably going all the way around the globe within the next 10 years or so. That doesn't mean that what we learn on it isn't practical and important even beyond the next 10 years or 20 years. There are still some principles there that should be important to you. The PR one is called, approaching PR as journalism. And the main gist of that is what it says. I'm not fooling you. That you actually will do better in PR if you learn how to approach it as a journalist. And so I take normal journalism skills and show you how they're applied in the PR world. And so some of the skills, for example, you need to have to write your reports are discussed in here also, because it's reviewing what journalistic skills are necessary as a PR person and why we would use them, the same as we would if we were writing for a newspaper or a news organization. So that's important to make that adjustment, either again here as an entrepreneurial journalist or as a publisher or if you get into a PR advertising agency. So sometimes the agencies are both. And so you might be hired as a PR expert because you have journalism training, but you may also have an opportunity to talk to people about the advertising part. And again, you'd want to blend this with my other video on digital advertising, since they are different, but there are similarities too. This one is also about advertising, about how to, a different sort of an approach to it. It doesn't apply in all situations. You have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, and think that this method that it talks about in here called Mandeville was for big ticket items. Like I used it for, again, working for the engineering firm. We would frequently get contracts that were worth $1 million. So consequently, you had time, you needed to take time to communicate with your prospective clients very effectively, because it was worth $1 million to the company. It wasn't worth $100 or whatever if you're selling advertising or something. It's a different ballgame. But some of the principles are still important, and so I included that when I was thinking of things that I could put in here for you to learn during your Mondays when you weren't in class. Like I said, this one just goes through some of the basics of journalism. I already had uploaded it in week 1, I think, or week 2, so you should have watched it already. But I know some people don't seem to have a clue about this doesn't talk specifically about our assignment, but talks about journalism in general. And so anybody struggling on how to do their writing and their report should gain something from this. This one I will talk about a little bit more today, or tomorrow, or Wednesday. And in fact, there is another video. Maybe we'll watch. Did I show you the video by chance about Clayton Christensen approach, his study for McDonald's on how to improve their milkshake sales? Nobody saw that one? Okay. So I showed it in my other class of success strategies. I didn't think I showed it here, and I may have to go to their site to show it now. But I think it's a short one. I think before we turn it over to the student presentation, as long as I have the microphone, we will go, just for now, just go over to my success strategy class and find it there, because it'll be easier, faster. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll go. Anyway, I'll get it here real quick. I'll go in here into success strategies. Come on. So this one has this is important for you to understand any type of promotion, PR or marketing, of any kind, advertising. Clayton Christensen is a Harvard professor named the top business mind in the world by the top UK universities. It's kind of like the Academy Award for business people, and they only do it every 2 years, and Clayton Christensen won it 2 terms in a row, so basically he was the reigning champion for 4 years, and he's kind of like LeBron James. He could probably win it every year. He's that revolutionary. People like Google have had their entire business approach changed by Clayton Christensen, as have people like Intel and Facebook. In fact, I'd say it's definitely everybody in the Silicon Valley has had their business approach changed by Clayton Christensen. They all understand it. Other companies, when I had my consulting contract with the National Bank of Kazakhstan, the group people it was a subsidiary that included that covered all of their investments of $80 billion of oil money. And they had never heard of Clayton Christensen, who is turning the world upside down in the world of business. And so once I introduced it to them, I was supposed to be helping them with their communications, but part of that I was trying to teach them things that they could talk about, smart things that when they took somebody to lunch in America, what they could talk to them about. And so I thought, well, this is cutting edge stuff. Maybe they'll be interested in this. Well, once I introduced them to Clayton Christensen, that's all we could talk about. And indeed, their next trip for investing, their billions of dollars, was to Silicon Valley, where everybody has turned to Clayton Christensen for his expertise. So getting down here someplace. Okay, so I'm going to milkshake. I may have actually given that one earlier. Well, I know he gives it as part of his Google one, and that's one of these here, Google. If you ever watch this on your own, I'd watch the longer version. I think this, maybe this is the one. There's a short version that just is a speech, and then there's a long version where the Google executives are quizzing him and kind of challenging him. And that's even in some ways more valuable when somebody's challenging you. By the way, that's good here in class too. I don't mind being challenged. Because when you're challenged, your defense is sometimes stronger than your original presentation. And so having Google executives challenging Clayton Christensen was really fun because he had an answer for every question they had. He was able to answer it. And these are smart people quizzing the smartest person in the room over this stuff. So, but that's a long one, so we're obviously not going to watch that one. I will go ahead and, I think, I'll go ahead and play this one where he himself I think this is his, introduces himself, his concept very basically, and then I will find the one in the milkshake. Because I was going to talk about Clayton Christensen anyway, and he's his best presenter.
Why is success so difficult to sustain? If you look across...
So that is, in a lot of ways, you could think of disruption as a theory of...
Anyway, what he's, by the way, starting to explain there is that if you try to take on a big company with their strongest product head on, you almost always lose. Because they'll always defend their strong product. But the disruptive technologies usually come at the bottom. That's why it's kind of a good comparison between David and Goliath, or maybe Achilles. The famous Achilles heel is you go after the weak part, and you go in at the bottom of the market where they can't defend themselves as well. And that's how you defeat a giant. But anyway, getting back to the marketing side, understanding what you're really selling is not the product, and it's not the demographic. You're not selling them to a bunch of demographics. You're selling a job. You're selling a product that will fulfill a job for somebody. That's what he calls it, hiring the product. So if you understand that in marketing, his concepts are revolutionary for marketing. It's also revolutionary for, like I say, for business development and so forth. There will be some, particularly about the milkshake. I think there's at least one question about Clayton Christensen on that, maybe two of them on the quiz, because he is revolutionary. He is turning the business world upside down. He's turning the university upside down. Most business universities and most business departments are still not teaching what he's been teaching the professional world. They're not teaching it yet to students, and that's a bad thing that they're not. And one of the reasons why they're not teaching is that some of his main theories relate to finance theories. And basically the finance, if you major in finance, they have a whole bunch of formulas for you to figure out good investments. And it turns out these formulas are part of the problem of getting good companies to destroy themselves, because the formulas do not work in a disruptive environment. They only work as long as there's no disruptive challenger. And once you have a disruptive challenger, basically your decisions made by the formulas created for finance majors destroys the company. They make bad decisions based on those formulas. And he's having a hard time. In fact, he calls it a religion. He's having a hard time getting finance professors to understand they need to change something. They can't continue to just teach these same formulas and not tell them, but these don't work sometimes, because they base the entire major. If you're a finance major, they're basing your entire major on these formulas they've created and they've used for 3 decades. And Clayton Christensen saying you need to throw them out. These will destroy a company if they're not, at least if they're not understood properly. They're okay in some cases, but if you not understand the negative impact of following your own formulas, you will kill your company. And part of that, especially in the Google video, if you want to watch it, if you find this of interest, he kind of goes into more depth on that. Basically, there's a formula for example called internal rate of return, and it basically tells you what you should invest your money in if you're a successful company. And almost always it will tell you to take the safest investment, and the safest investment is almost always what he calls an efficiency innovation, which is how to make your company more efficient, which sometimes means laying off employees and buying robots or whatever. But it doesn't include new products. And so they're investing their money in becoming more profitable by efficiency, but they're not preparing for the next round of innovation. And when that next disruptive innovation comes along, they're not in the forefront, because investing your money into disruptive innovation, first off, can yield nothing in some cases. And if it does yield something, it can take 10 years, whereas efficiency innovations take 6 months or 1 year. And so all the formulas for finance students go counter to what you need to understand to fight off the challenger in a disruptive environment. And it will lead to your death as a company. And because he's getting so much resistance by professors, probably even at Harvard, to changing what they teach students in the area of finance, he's just calling it a religion. They're following this religion faithfully to their own demise, in essence. So it's not really that complex. I don't think it's not that. I find it very interesting and a lot of aha understandings as I listen to his videos. Things that help me gain new paradigms of reality. And a lot of people are too. Like I said, the UK universities say he's the best mind in the world in business right now. Okay, well, let's have the group come up and present, and so hopefully you can get it done in the 50 minutes or so that you could take if you need it. Okay, so you have a USB or something?
Yes. We uploaded to the model.
Okay. In essence, somebody who didn't do a good job of the first one is going to have to redo the first one if they're going to do a good job in their in their final. But their final is basically the first one and the second one put together and maybe tweaked a little bit. So if you did a good job in your first one, or something where the problems were obvious, where you made mistakes, and you can correct those obvious mistakes, and then not make the mistakes in the second one, you put them together, create more of a kind of a transition from one to the other, and voila, you have your final. And that's so that should be easy for those of you who did it right the first time, and that's what I'm hoping. And that's a good thing. I don't have any problem with you getting an A. You just have to do it. You have to learn it and earn it. Okay, let's try this again. Not what I wanted. Oops. Once you take apart the system, you have to put it back together right too. Okay, there we go. And I want to blow that up a little bit so you can see a little better. Okay, so this going back to something I gave to you back in back before your first one was written. So again, the lead should be, is it possible to do a different type of lead and get an A? Absolutely it is. But why would you bother? Why would you do something when I've told you how to do your lead? And your lead is worth a lot. And your lead leads. So it makes sense to do what is what I've shown you in the criteria sheet and in the sample, a product, and that is to use a speech interview lead, which again, this is another example. Technology doesn't fortify a culture, but instead it facilitates change in a culture, according to Professor Kenneth Harvey, lecturer of Chaiman University, Malaysia. Harvey was the keynote speaker for the conference, History of Media, held at Chaiman. Also speaking at the conference were a group of student researchers from the university. Kept it very simple. She could have gone in a little more detail in the second paragraph, but there really isn't that much of a need to either. One of the problems that some of you have had is that you've made paragraph 2 very long, and it being long isn't a problem. I mean, long, I'm saying 2 or 3 sentences, but sometimes your sentences have been in the category of what I call an about sentence. Okay, so when we start looking also at the, let me turn on, and go to the critique sheet. This has basically some of the stuff I was sharing on some of your reports. Go down the critique sheet, and maybe that's a little too much. One of the under attribution, first off, some of you need to B is a problem for some of you. Some of you didn't read B, which is that the first time you refer to me or anybody, you go ahead and refer to me by my full name, Ken Harvey or Kenneth Harvey. I'm not picky about that. I did say, I think in here actually, the name and title. Actually, the title is not necessary to refer to me the first time necessarily, but frequently it would be used. So Professor Ken Harvey is appropriate, or it could just be Ken Harvey, and then if it's appropriate to the story, at some point you do say who I am, for credibility's sake and so forth. So I actually went a little bit too far in saying that you should use the title with the first reference. That's not necessarily true. That's not the important part. The important part that I'm trying to explain here is you use the full name the first time, and after that, it's the family name. And my family name is Harvey, so you use my family name with the second reference, and just Harvey said, Harvey said, Harvey said. Now, I'm teaching you Associated Press style, and lots of newspapers won't go by Associated Press style. That's fine. But if you do any international work, it's good for you to know Associated Press style, because Associated Press dominates the Western world. And so I'm going to teach you Associated Press style rather than no style. That seems to be my alternative. Do I teach you Associated Press style, which dominates half the world, or no style? Because all the other newspapers and stuff have their own style, and they're not consistent. So it doesn't make any sense for me to teach you inconsistency. So I'm teaching you a consistent style, which is Associated Press style, AP style, not APA. Don't get confused with academic style. It's called APA style. Totally different acronym than AP style. So Associated Press style versus Association of Psychologists, whatever APA is for. Anyway, something to do with psychology. But what I was getting to here is one of my things here is do not write, the speaker spoke about freedom in America. Instead, be specific and write something like, the speaker says competition of ideas is the key to maintaining freedom in America. That first example is what I call an about sentence, where you talk about something and you have no content of interest. Why do I care what they spoke about if you don't tell me what they said? Okay, about is the ultimate vagueness is about. And so many of you had sentences, even if you didn't use the word about, in essence, you fall prey, particularly in paragraph 2, when you're trying to summarize, with using about sentences that are extremely vague. And so actually this example here that is very, very short and does not try to give any about information, it might be better, maybe safer than trying to make a 2 to 3 sentence second paragraph and finding yourself using about sentences that I might criticize that are too vague. However, the advantage of telling a little bit more in paragraph 2 is to get the reader thinking about the different subjects that were discussed at this conference. And since in reality we're talking about covering 15 weeks of content, we've covered a lot of subjects. And so there is some advantage in suggesting the other subjects. But ideally, you will do it in such a way that it gives more information than just say other speakers talked about something such and such. Okay, that's then about sentence. So you try to avoid that. In this case, they avoided it by not even having that second sentence. They simply went right into it. Having a little bit more in paragraph 2 helps you with some of your transitions because you've already alerted the reader that they talked about other subjects. But then the disadvantage is you're tempted to write about sentences. Okay, so again, I've mentioned that this kind of, you try to tie your lead in with your bridge, and this paragraph we consider the bridge. And what I've tried to teach you is that the bridge is typically a direct quote that has some relationship to the lead, because in essence, as you go into the body of the text, the direct quote becomes kind of your lead of the body. And so it brings you back to the beginning where you start giving the detail of what happened in its complete form. And so in this case, the printing press allowed a much more rapid change in the development of books and the spread of literature, said Harvey. So even though it doesn't exactly say this changes culture, you can understand why it would change culture, right? So it works. Typically, I try to have something a little bit more direct than that, a little bit more obvious tie to the lead, but it works. He stated that a great advancement in the world, it was a great advancement in the world during the modernity period. Quote, with the expansion of literacy and the print of more books, the common person could get a hold of the books, said Harvey. Anyway, some of your problems also had to do with punctuation of your quotes. Quite a few people had problems with those. This person did not. It's the comma goes inside and then the quote mark. Let me go back to the criteria sheet and look at that. So under language, down here from last semester, I greatly expanded this section because people were struggling with it a lot during last semester. So I decided I'm going to expand this part and give them very exact different, examples of how to handle type 1, type 2, and type 3 quotes, and what the nature is of them normally. So type 1 is the attributions at the start, Harvey said, and it's typically an indirect quote. Not always, but typically. I think I mentioned the example where sometimes I use type 1 direct quotes is when I've interviewed a lot of people, and I don't want to take the time, and they're short quotes. And so I don't want to have a summary transition between every quote, because the quotes are short, they're all talking about the same thing, and so I put a bunch of direct quotes right in a row. So in that case, you can't very well go type 1, type 2, type 1, type 2, because when you start reading the type 2, you're thinking that quote must be going to the previous type 1. And so it confuses the reader. And so that's why when you have a series of direct quotes, and again, it's almost always means you're doing some sort of a man in the street sort of survey, something like that. And they're all talking about the same subject. That's why you don't have transition paragraphs between them. In that case, you go ahead and maybe make a lot of them type 1 direct quotes, short direct quotes. But that's the exception. And most of you don't, even when you get in the professional world, that will be uncommon when you get in that situation. It would be, actually, I end up doing that more in the academic world than I would in the professional world, because in the academic world, I do a lot of surveys. And I want to I give some open-ended questions, and so that people can give me their direct quotes, and it makes my academic stories sound more interesting. And so I find myself, in some cases, writing a whole bunch of quotes by newspaper executives about what they think about graduates or something, and I don't want to do a new transition paragraph with each one of those. And so I do a lot of type 1 direct quotes. So that the norm is type 1 is an indirect quote, and you're getting that attribution at the start because you don't want them to be confused, especially with a long indirect quote, that you take a long time to tell them, oh, by the way, this isn't me talking, this is this other person who said this. But because there's no quote marks, they don't know that until they get to the attribution. So type 1s, that's also why, in essence, type 1s are used a lot in broadcast, because you have a person actually speaking that indirect quote, or in some cases maybe a direct quote, and they don't want to say quote, so they don't put quote marks into their spoken news presentation, and so they feel compelled to give the attribution right at the start. But then they also have the supplement of video interviews, which is kind of replaces direct quotes. So, but in print, it's like I say, you want to, when you're starting something without quote marks, you don't want them to get confused and think it's you writing, that you're saying this. You want them to know that it's somebody else said this, even though it's an indirect quote. So type 2, again, the attribution comes at the end, and it is, actually bought a pointer last night and I forgot to bring it. So it has a transition, the comma, and the quotation mark after that. The one where a lot of people get confused is down here under type 3, however. So let's go through type 3 carefully. Because of the confusion of this, I put two different examples under type 3, because they're very different in punctuation specifically. So this type 3 is breaking one sentence into two halves. And so you pay for native advertising, comma, direct or quote marks, Harvey said, comma, quote marks, and lowercase b, but. This is because this is still part of the same sentence, the same quote. I broke the one sentence quote into two halves and put my attribution in between. So it does not start with another capital letter, because this is still part of the same sentence I'm quoting. And so it goes on like this, but it blends with unpaid content, including some of your own. If you have a type 3 quote that has two sentences and your attribution is in between, then it's different. And so in this case, native advertising is one reason why on the internet a company would be crazy not to practice integrated marketing communication, IMC, comma, quote mark, Harvey said. Notice here, it's another quote mark and a capitalized T. And the reason why it's a capitalized T is now the second part of this type 3 is a complete sentence. And so now we treat it like a complete sentence. So the situation, the way you handle this, in this case with two sentences, with your attribution in between the two sentences, is different than when you have one sentence and you put your attribution in the middle of that sentence. But it's still one sentence. The quote is still one sentence. So you have a lowercase but, and here you have an uppercase the, because this, again, is splitting one single sentence in half with your attribution, and this one has two separate sentences. So those are both still type 3, but the main difference, of course, would be whether you capitalize the first word or the second, or the part that comes after the attribution. And periods also come inside the quote marks. So a lot of you are making mistakes in this area. Again, that's why I expanded this part of the critique sheet so that you would see examples, and if you read it, understand why we do what we do. A few of you, by the way, also, as long as we're going down the list here, still have, you get a little bit confused about about this whole area, this F subject. Again, at least in Western journalism, and that's what I'm going to teach. I don't know Eastern journalism. And again, we're at an international school, and some of you may be writing for international media. And I do not know what Eastern rules are, so I'm not going to try to keep them. But in America, the editors almost never say anything but said. Never use an attribution verb other than said, or says. And if you mix those says and said, you need to do it strategically and understand why you would use one and why you would use the other. And so as I've tried to explain in the past, says is particularly useful if you're writing for a magazine, because magazine stories are frequently 6 months old before they ever get into print. And so you actually never tell the reader in that magazine when you did the interview, because you don't want them to know this is a 6-month-old interview, because that's not, newsworthiness includes timeliness. And so you don't want to reveal to them that element of that value of your news story is low, real low. 6 months old is not timeliness. And so in a magazine story, you use typically, you don't say when it occurred. The only reason why you would say it, or why you go to past tense, is if for some reason where you interviewed them, it was important. So you end up telling them where, and in the where, it kind of implies the when. And so even the where element can sometimes force you to feel like you go to past tense. So, but normally you don't say where and you don't say when in an interview in a magazine, and so you go with says the whole time. As I was competing with daily newspapers, I would always go with magazine style in my stories. I'd always use present tense says. Now, going back to the original point is that why don't we use other stuff? Stated, objected, laughed, demanded, I don't know, whatever else you can come up with, any synonym to say. And the editors in America and I have come to agree with that. First, by the way, I didn't agree with them. At first, when I was your age, I didn't believe them when they said that if you only use the verb to say, then nobody will notice the verb at all. You understand that? If you only use the verb to say, then nobody will notice the verb at all. The only time they notice the verb of attribution is when you start varying it. When you think this is boring, and so I'm going to use these different things. I'm going to say said and questioned and claimed and all these other words you can come up with. And that's when you notice the verbs of attribution, is when you vary them because you think it's boring to use one. But if you go to, let me see, do I have it here? Excuse me. I'm going to take just a second to take you to what I referred to in the past. I've been choked up here again. Okay. When you're editing, I will share this with you. These are about 30 of the top newspapers in America. And so I'm just going to, this is their front page for one specific day a few years ago, actually in 2011, so it's been a little while. But that's not the point. I'm just going to here's a Wall Street Journal. And if we look at this and try to find the verbs of attribution, we see a said here. Takes these guys actually they go contrary to what I suggest. They take a while sometimes to get to they're becoming more, how do I say this? Newspapers in America are, first off, becoming more biased, and they don't seem to mind it. And one sign of that is they're not using as much attribution. So they're giving their own perspective, their own summaries without any attribution whatsoever in many cases. And we see this with this article. They have gotten into all the way to this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs, and so far they have not had any attribution. There is an attribution here in that they're referring to a survey of this, or the Census Bureau. So in a sense, they are doing that, and they're just doing summary. So that one has some excuse for not having attribution other than the source. Get down here. Okay, so again, we're getting kind of summary first. According to, by the way, they use according to usually, and I also did not agree with them on this originally, and now I do, but I still fall into the trap sometimes. They only use according when it's not a human source. So if it's a web page, in this case, according to the federal criminal complaint, in other words, it's a document. So most of the newspapers in America only use according to when it's not a live person that they talk to. So that's good too, to know that. Okay, here, well, this is it within a quote. So there they use the word admitted, but that's within a quote. So that's not here. That's again according to documents. So this is a document based. So they didn't do a lot of interviews. The Wall Street Journal is a little different animal, so it may be a bad example. But here says, so scientists at China's General Sports Administration think the hoo-ha is critical to the physical needs of the world's most populous nation. Chinese are facing, quote, more pressure than ever before, and they need a way to release it, says. So they use the verb says here. So they haven't given a time yet. They haven't given a time or place. So they're going with the present tense says in this case. Anyway, let me go to, like I say, Wall Street Journal is a little different, so I'm going to go away from that. You're not seeing a lot of attribution at all on page 1. So let's go to a more normal newspaper, and hopefully they will cooperate to make my point. Okay, so looking down here, the crime story, they're doing quite a bit of summary before they get to okay, so here we come to a quote. Leticia said, here's another quote. Richard said, let's jump over to the other story, see if they have some quotes. Again, this one's kind of reviewing, doing a lot of summary before they get to actual, they're doing an analysis, whatever. Announced, yeah, well, announced is a little bit different animal. If it's actually something new and so forth, you see that occasionally. But then once they go to the actual attribution, this is the bill that Congress needs to pass, Obama said. We can't go to the jump, so we can't see it. Here's on another story. This very much fits into the sweet spot of what we envisioned, said, Hana, whatever his name is. And it's really a game changer, she said. So again, I could go through these, and when you're in the editing class, I'll make all these available to you to prove to you that in Western journalism, it's said, and in some cases says, if they want to go present tense and keep it more current, for some reason. But I could go through all of these, and you see very few verbs of attribution other than to say. And that's my point. That's the Western standard, and a lot of you don't believe me, I guess, because you keep using other verbs. Don't use other verbs. Just use to say, in its various forms. Anyway, this person understood these things. A criticism was the factors that polls, that's a grammar problem there, but the factors that polls print into existence are Northwestern European capitalists, bureaucrats, and pastors. And one thing I did complain about some of your stories is once you bring up something like that, you have to explain it. How did they pull it into existence? Okay, you're making a statement and you're not explaining it. You have to explain that. So you can't presume that again, my perspective on this is that you're writing this to somebody not in this class. And so they have no reason they don't understand. They don't have any clue how was it that European capitalists, bureaucrats, and pastors pulled print into existence. They don't know. So if you bring up a subject, you do have to explain it. Many of you did fall into that trap where you decided you're trying to cover lots of subjects, so you put in one sentence like that, and there's a bit for an editor, for a professional editor, there's this big question mark. Why? Why? How did these people pull this into existence, and why did they pull print into existence? And you have to answer that question. If you leave that question unanswered, a professional editor would either send it back to you to finish the story, or they would cut it out altogether. But they're not going to bring up a subject that they don't explain. It just is a big question mark for the reader there. Anyway, again, this is a 95%. They did a good job overall and got a good grade for it. I'm going to jump down to 80% to give you one that's more problematic. Okay, this person had trouble with their lead. So as for conducting PR practitioners like a journalist, you should think of yourself a captive journalist with your only best assignment to cover whatever, said Ken Harvey, a journalist professor. So the form is right in the sense that it is a speech interview lead, but very wordy, very awkward. I can't ignore that. You have to, of all the sentences that you write, be very careful with your lead. Because you know I'm going to read the lead carefully. I may skim some parts. I mean, there's 45 or 50 students in the class, each going to send me 1,000 words. I'm not going to read every word. But I guarantee I'll read every lead. So if you're going to screw up someplace other than in your lead. Because the odds of my reading it are 100% if it's a lead. If it's down somewhere in your story and it's not critical to the story anyway, it might say the very same thing, and I might, even if I do read it, I may not care that much. If it's down in the middle of your story and you have a sentence like that is awkward and wordy and bleh, I hate it, it's down in your lead, down in your story someplace, I'm not going to care that much. But if it's your lead, I'm going to care a lot. So if you need some help, ask somebody for some help with your lead, for heaven's sake, to make sure that your grammar is good. Your lead should be really good. And get whatever help you need to do it, for heaven's sake. So if you have to pay somebody. Do whatever you have to do. That lead has to be good. So get some help with it. So don't pay somebody to do your story because they don't know how to do your story. But, and I'm not really encouraging you to cheat. I'm being sarcastic. And you shouldn't have to pay somebody to help you with one sentence. You can probably go ask a professor for your help with one sentence, right? You can find some help for one sentence. Let that sentence be your lead. Get some help with it. If you have any question at all about your ability to write that lead in a grammatically good fashion, get help, for heaven's sake. Kind of going through, there were, again, different verbs, argued and stuff like that. Did a lot of wordiness, agreeing to Harvey, a journalism student. This sort of stuff, some of you had trouble with this. You decided to throw in other phrases that really weren't necessary. So you see 3 of them right in a row here, and I saw some just like this in some of your papers that I marked down. Is you felt compelled to put in some introductory phrases, sentence after sentence or paragraph after paragraph, and they're not needed. They're just wordiness. And so one of the things that we talk about in the critique sheet, I don't go into a lot of detail because it's hard to describe, it's hard to explain wordiness. But you just simply don't put in extra words you don't need. So I don't know that I need to define that. Wordiness is too many words. Too many words of no value. You don't want to put in any extra words of no value. That's the bottom line. In my textbook, and I think I told you this earlier, but in my textbook, I use the analogy of having a pitcher of juice. And I bring a pitcher of juice and some cups, and I start filling up these cups with juice and offering it to people, and it's refreshing and wonderful. And so you take the juice and you love it. And then I start running low on the pitcher of juice. And so I take some water and put some water in the pitcher and mix it up. And then I keep offering some juice. Now it's very diluted juice. People still, out of politeness, okay, yeah, I'll take your juice. And then it gets kind of low, so I put in some more water and mix it up, and I start offering some more juice. And at that point, people are saying, no, I don't think so, because the juice is diluted. You can dilute your content with words. Wordiness destroys your content. So you need to avoid wordiness like the plague. In part of our point of journalism is keeping things simple words, simple phrases, simple sentences, simple paragraphs, everything simple. It also includes things like that, where we want to avoid these sorts of sentences where you throw in a bunch of words for no good reason. They're not needed there. And some that I saw this last week when I was grading your papers, they were a lot longer than that. Sometimes they were 3 or 4 times that long, introductory phrases and clauses that had no value to them. I know that they're kind of being used to try to create some transition, some sense of transition, but this isn't the way to do it. Don't do it this way. The best way is to have, like something up here, this is the best transition, where you have a summary sentence. Again, I would argue that you don't need to say argued, but Harvey said that we should know how to write a story with multiple sources, as well as an interview can be a research topic to help create your PR plan. Well, some awkward grammar there, but you get the idea. Yellow journalism works with in the short run because it loses its credibility and ultimately subverts the journalist effort, he said. Well, actually, those don't float each other. That's another reason why I got 80%. This one should have said something about yellow journalism. Then this would provide your transition. So that's not a good example. But if you're going for transition, like I say, my way of doing it is to go back and forth between an indirect kind of summary type sentence and then going to a direct quote. Let's see if he does better down here. Again, bad grammar. When date back to early agricultural village, a journalism student, this is a long introductory phrase, so not worded properly. Journalism student, Victoria's opinion, token systems appear, helped early people recognize a symbol could stand for anything or ideas. Well, terrible like I say, I didn't mark all the bad grammar. So that's, again, a reason why this one, as I've said in the past, I will overlook a little bit of bad grammar, but if it makes a sentence not understandable, I don't know what she's just said in that sentence. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook. And so you need to avoid bad grammar that's so bad that I can't understand it, what the heck you're trying to say. It ends up being kind of crossing over to the area of wordiness also. When you start throwing a bunch of words and it's bad grammar and it's wordy, I struggle with it. And end up, again, I didn't mark it because again, doing 45 students, 1,000 words, I'm not going to mark a bunch of stuff on this in this final paper. You're not going to see a final paper with a bunch of markups. I can't do it. And so I marked a few things for myself, and I made some notes up here at the start, about what this person was doing badly. But I'm not going to hand these back. I'll hand back. I'll try to give you some feedback on your next one that you hand in Wednesday to help you prepare for the final. I will try to do that. But your final, you're not going to get feedback on hardly at all, because that's too time consuming for me. I can't grade 45 or 50 students with 1,000 words each. I can't do it justice in the sense of marking it up. I can go through it and give you a good grade. That's another thing. But once I take the time to start telling you why you did badly, then it's going to take more than a week to grade them. And I don't have a week. They give me 3 days. Once I get your stuff, I have 3 days to grade it. So I can go through it and give you a good grade, I think, a fair grade, but I can't give you a bunch of reasons why I graded it. If after the final you think I did a bad job and you want to come talk to me, then we'll pull out your paper and we'll go over it together. That I'll do. But I expect that 45 of you won't ask me to do that, so I can afford to do that. I can afford to do that with the 3 or 4 that might ask me to go through their paper with them. And I'd be happy to do that, by the way, happy to do that. But you're not going to get a lot of feedback on your final exam because it's just not possible to do it in 3 days and go through all of them, 1,000 words each. But anyway, this one, a lot of grammar problems.